we are going to learn about the national income determination in two-sector model. So let's begin with the concepts. The first one is aggregate expenditure. So what is all about aggregate expenditure is the total amount that all a particular producer and a consumer, you can say, plan to spend on their domestic goods and services that they are willing to buy, and that's called aggregate expenditure. So it's just a total amount of that total amount that all the economic units, that's in terms of domestic goods and services, is need to buy. That's called aggregate expenditure. So when we talk about the expenditure, the planned spending that's related to the households, firms, government, and foreigners. So this is called a two-sector model which combines in household and firms, and the three-sector model, that is household, firms, and government. And when we talk about the four-sector model, that is the household, firms, government, and foreigners. That means the foreign institutions that I'm talking about, the foreigners, right? So the next concept is aggregate expenditure. When we talk about the symbolically, that how the aggregate expenditure denotes, that is the combination of consumption, investment, government spending, and you can say net exports. So when we talk about the net exports, how to calculate the net exports? That is the you can see difference between the exports and imports. That means the x minus m. Government spending stands for G, investment stands for I, and consumption stands for C. So it cannot be concluded that the aggregate expenditure is same as GDP, because both having a different conceptual framework. So when we talk about the aggregate expenditure, we always talk about the spending level on domestic goods and services. That is the planned expenditure. That is the planned spending that a particular producer or a consumer, that they plan to spend on buying goods and services. So whatever the aggregate expenditure based on monthly, yearly, quarterly, half yearly, that exactly called aggregate expenditure level. When we talk about the gross domestic product, we always talk about the actual spending or output. That what exactly the amount spent on you can say producing the goods and services, that exactly called the gross domestic product. So that doesn't mean that it is an aggregate actual spending. No. So if I'm willing to today spend on buying the goods and services, and that call you can say gross domestic product, whereas the producer, or likewise the producer, is willing to produce goods and services for, you can say, exchange of four factors of production from the consumers, that actually call the gross domestic product, and that's, in other words, we call output. So these two have a different conceptual work, will never be same. The next one, that is the aggregate expenditure and national output. So when we talk about aggregate expenditure, it symbolically denote AE, and when we talk about national output, stands for Y. So automatically, the aggregate expenditure and income are not necessarily equal. There are various situations they might be equal, but it's not necessary to be equal, because it depends on the firms when they formulate or plan their productions with the calculations of all those quantities that the particular consumer or the people are want to buy or willing to buy. So if there any error or mistake on the part of the firms while they planning the production process, whether it would exceed or fall below those amount which has been estimated that the people want to buy, then ultimately the, you can say, the aggregate you can say output or the national output will automatically exceed or fall just because of the error or the mistake which has been done by the firms while planning their production processes or regarding the quantities or the total quantities that the people want to buy. So that's a bigger, you can say, a downfall, a low, when we talk about the errors and the mistakes in estimating the productions of all those quantities that the people are actually want to buy. So this is the major difference, that aggregate expenditure and the, you can say, income are not necessarily income just because of these two reasons, the two main important reasons. What if the aggregate expenditure and income level are not equal? So, what will happen when they are not equal, whether it would be less than income or more than the income? So, what would the outcome that the actually firms and the people are willing to face? So, if there are two main situation, if the aggregate expenditure is less than the income, that means people want to buy less than what has been produced, and ultimately the firm has to accumulate the stock which has been stored in the, you can say, warehouses, which has been kept in the particular, you can say, monopolistic markets. So automatically, when the expenses are more than the income, then the outcome that the firm can do is to reduce the production process of all those quantities where the particular people wants to buy all those products which are really the sales has been increased. So that's the main reason. If the expenditure, the aggregate expenditure is more than the income, then there is a situation arises for the firm that it ultimately reduces the production process of all those quantities which are actually demanded by the people. The next situation is aggregate expenditure if more than the income, then ultimately the firms will increase the production. That means the people are actually increasingly want to buy, and it actually greater than the actual productions. So automatically, the whatever the stock in the warehouses will automatically decline as the people are actually demanding, actually buying all those quantities which are actually available in the stock. And ultimately, if the people are buying more and more stock, then automatically the inventories will get declined in the warehouses or in the particular, you can see, market. And ultimately the outward would be the outcome, the firms will increase the production process of all those quantities whereby the people wants to buy the products. So these are the two main situation if both, that is aggregate expenditure and the income will not equal. Now we talk about the equilibrium national income. When we talk about, you can say, the equilibrium income in the two-sector model or the national income determination in the two-sector model, there is an equilibrium condition, that is the aggregate expenditure is equal to income. That means this particular equation will be shown by a, you can say, drawn a line, that is a 45-degree line. This degree line is an interaction of the expenditure, consumption, as well as income. So that is, and this is a way that how the 45-degree angle line, which is begin from the origin, ultimately it increases where the expenditure, if the expenditure would get increased, the income will also get increased. And that is the main, that is the ultimate outcome, is that the aggregate expenditure is equal to income. So, what is the 45-degree angle line? It's just a tool which always assists that how to identify the exact economy equilibrium position. the one of the property of 45-degree line, that whatever the point which is along with the line, it always shows a situation wherein the value of a variable on the horizontal axis is equal to whatever the you can see your value on the vertical axis. So whether it would be the actual output, which is called income, and whether it would be the vertical axis called an aggregate expenditure. So this is a particular diagrammatic presentation where, which I already told, that the 45-degree angle line which begins or emerge from the origin and which is shown in the particular diagram, that means, so whatever, if the you can see the aggregate expenditure is 100, then automatically the actual output will also become 100. So if the aggregate expenditure increases from 100 to 200, then ultimately the actual output will also get increased from by the same inputs, that is 100 to 200 units. And that exactly the conceptual or diagrammatic representation of the 45-degree angle line. The next concept is how the equilibrium condition of the national income in two sector model, where the aggregate expenditure and income will always be equal and shown in the horizontal line, which has been shown in the screen as well. That is, AE is equal to Y. That means the aggregate expenditure, let's suppose 20 rupees. So automatically the actual output will also become 20. So what how the equilibrium point will be achieved when the 45-degree angle line intersect the aggregate expenditure curve. That means the intersection point between these two concepts, that is aggregate expenditure or income and 45-degree angle line, that point is exactly called the equilibrium national income point, which stands for EO. So when we talk about EO, it is an original equilibrium income, national income point, which by an interaction of the 45-degree angle line and the aggregate expenditure. So automatically, if you can see that I have shown in the earlier slides that what is the exact condition or the original condition of the national equilibrium point, that is aggregate expenditure is equal to income. So automatically it has been shown here that the aggregate expenditure is equal to income. That means if the aggregate expenditure is 20, the actual output or income will also become 20. So the interaction point of 45-degree angle line and aggregate expenditure, and that point, original point, is equal to E0, and that's called the equilibrium national income level. So when we talk about in pesos, pesos is a currency of the South American countries. So when we talk about conversion of the pesos, that it ultimately turned into a rupees, that is 1.49 rupees. So if we talk about the currencies, the foreign currencies into an Indian currency. So pesos is an American currency. Is a Southern American country's currency, that is called peso, which turns into an Indian foreign currency, that is 1.49. That means 1.50 rupees, which is one of the lowest currencies of the American countries, and when we convert into the Indian. So when we talk about Indian rupees, we talk about 20 rupees, and ultimately the 20 units will be the output. The next one is equilibrium income. When we talk about when there is a changes in the aggregate expenditure with respect to the income. So there is a situation when the aggregate expenditure is equal to Y. When we talk on the previous slides, I already told there are two situations when aggregate expenditure is is less than or more than the income. But now when we talk about the equilibrium income, that is a equilibrium condition, which is aggregate expenditure is equal to income. So what will happen? What would be the outcome for the people and the firms? That means the when the aggregate expenditure is equal to income, that means there is no specific reason for any of the firms that they can able to adjust their production process of all those products that people are actually want to buy. So ultimately this is a equilibrium point, or you can say the equilibrium income, where the economy is in equilibrium, where the economy is actually stable, when the expenses, the aggregate expenditure or expenses are actually equals to income. That means, in other words, I could say equilibrium can be obtained by having a equality between the income and aggregate expenditure. That means the y is equal to ae, that ultimately calls the equilibrium income or equilibrium national income level. So that's a major concept, that how you elaborate when the equilibrium income could will be obtained. That means it will be obtained when aggregate expenditure is equal to income, or income or y is equal to a. So both the have the same meanings. So this is the concept of equilibrium income, that how you elaborate when the aggregate expenditure is equal to income. Now, when we talk about the equilibrium incomes, automatically when there is a changes in aggregate expenditure and income, then how it should show through the diagrammatically, how it will represent graphically, and that is more important to understand. Suppose there is a situation when the economy aggregate expenditure will increases. So what would be the outcome? So this is the outcome if the aggregate expenditure would get increased. So when we talk about the aggregate expenditure, the original aggregate expenditure, that is AE0, which always been equal to y, so it automatically shown here that aggregate expenditure is rupees 20. So when there is an increase in aggregate expenditure, then automatically the aggregate expenditure which shifts upward from AEO to AE1. That means when the 45-degree angle line intersect the AEO, that means the original aggregate expenditure curve, or the line which is a horizontal line. So automatically the intersection point of 45-degree angle line and aggregate expenditure O, and that point is called EO, that is the original equilibrium income point, that is E0. So when there is an aggregate expenditure increases, the automatically it will shift upward. A new equilibrium point will emerge when the 45-degree angle line intersects to the new aggregate expenditure line, that is AE1, and the new equilibrium point, that is EE1. That means when the aggregate expenditure increases, a new equilibrium point will shift from AO to E1. EO to E1. So EO is the original, and when the expenditure increases, the new equilibrium point will obtain, that is E1. Automatically, what would be the result of this increase of expenditure? Then the output will also get increased as the equilibrium point will also shifts upward. So automatically, the actual output or income will also get increased from 20 to 30 units. So if the expenditure increases from 20 to 30 rupees, then automatically the actual output will also get increased from YO to Y1. That means 20 to 30 units due to a increase in aggregate expenditure. So automatically what would be the conclusion of this diagram, that if there is an increase in the aggregate expenditure curve, then automatically the national output will also get increased. So this is called a change in aggregate expenditure and income. So due to a change in income, automatically the aggregate expenditure will also get increased, and vice versa. So if there is an decrease in the aggregate expenditure, so automatically the national output will also get you can say decrease. That means the new equilibrium point would be EO to E1, which is in the downfall or downward shift. If there is a downward shift of aggregate expenditure, if there is a change, you can say in aggregate expenditure, which is called a downfall, and automatically the national output will also get decreased. So there is another situation. This is a situation of an increase of aggregate expenditure, and I'm also explaining when there is a decrease in aggregate expenditure, so automatically just due to the decrease in national output. Now we come up to the next concept now here, that is consumption and income. When we talk about aggregate expenditure and income, which is the earlier concept, but now the Keene has developed a new concept, that is in 1936, which always or he has been suggested that consumption spending always tends to a increase with income. That means if there is a change in income, then automatically should be a change in consumption spending. So automatically, in other words, I could say the consumption spending, it depends upon the how much the income that you earn and able to spend on buying the goods and services. So in other words, when the household having a higher income, so definitely they will spend more and more on buying the goods and services from the producer. So ultimately, when we talk about the relationship, according to Keynes, there is a positive relationship between the consumption and income, or in other words, consumption, spending, and income. So this is a tabulation, is representing in tabulation, which has been the income, consumption, change in income, change in consumption, and MPC. What is MPC? MPC is marginal propensity to consume. So when we talk about marginal propensity to consume, that means if there when it refers to a change in consumption spending due to a change in its income. So how it would be calculated? It is given in the question. Income and consumption is will be given in the question. Now you need to calculate the change in income, that is delta Y, change in consumption, that is delta C, and ultimately the question has to calculate the marginal propensity to consume using the following data of income and consumption. So to calculate the MPC, you need a delta C by delta Y, that is delta says change in consumption spending, and delta Y is change in income. So in the question, income and consumption will always be given to you. So the income is already given, that is 0 to 200, 400, and so on. So if you see the income, that is, it begins from 0 and ultimately it goes on increasing. When we talk about consumption, it also goes on increasing, begin from 200 till 1400. Now, how to calculate the change in income? As the income is first, we see the first row, that is of income, that income column, that is 0. So ultimately the change in income, that the delta Y is also 0. That means we can put either dash or 0. It's up to the learner choice. So the next second one, this how to calculate the delta Y, that is the 200 minus 0, 200, 400 minus 200, 200, 600 minus 400, 200, and so on. Then ultimately 1600 minus 1400 and ultimately 200. So that means that the change in income is always is in equal to 200 rupees. So when we talk about change in consumption, that is units, so same procedure will be followed while calculating the change in income. The change in consumption spending, that is the first one, is automatically 200. So there is no upper value has been given. So ultimately put it dash. 350 minus 200, 150. 500 minus 350, 150. 650 minus 500, 150. 800 minus 650, 150. 950 minus 800, 150, and so on. So ultimately, you have already found out the delta Y and delta C. So this is a way that how to calculate the change in income and change in consumption. So once you calculate the change in income and change in consumption, you can easily calculate the marginal propensity to consume will automatically says that the consumption is dependent upon the income. So if there is a change in income or the income increases, that means your spending level will also increase. So when we look up the situation or the code in the portion, that your income will remains the same and consumption will remains the same, so automatically the MPC will also remains the same. That means 150 by 200.75, 150 by 200.75, and so on. That means if your change in income will remains the same and your change in consumption will also remains the same, the ultimate outcome of MPC will also remains the same, that is 0.75. We have to say like this, it's 0.75. Mostly the learners would say it's 0.75, it's 0.45. No, you have to speak like that. It's 0.75 because after the decimal you have to speak the actual digit, that is 0.75, not rather than 0.75. So without decimal, you can speak okay 75, 80 units, 50 units. But when we talk about decimal digits, we always speak the actual digits. That is 0.75. So this is a way that how you represent the tabular statement relate to the consumption and income, which always shows a positive relationship between these two terms according to Keynes, which has given the conceptual framework of this positive relationship in 1936. Now we talk about as it is a explanation of the tabular. So if the income had the level of income, automatically your consumption spending would become also higher. So if the income is equal to 0, that means consumption spending is also equal to 200. So what was the second point of the explanation is already mentioned in the table. That is, when the income is zero, the consumption spending will become or equal to 200. Now, if the consumption spending and income are equal, so there is a saturation point when the income and consumption will become equal. So if you look up you can see the fifth row, that is 800 is income and consumption is also 800. So automatically there is also a situation where both are equal. So we cannot say, okay, income is higher, the consumption is higher, but if the income is equal, the consumption will also equal. So if we look up the if any amount, if any income is less than the 800, so automatically consumer, what the consumer do, consumer buy more and more units of goods and services, or more and more quantities of goods. So if we talk about that the 800, the above the 800 level, which are already shown here, when the income is less than 800, consumption is higher than the income. So if you look up in the particular table, if the any of the income is less than the 800, so if you look up, the less than the 800 is 0, 200, 400, 600. So automatically then the income is less than 800, that means consumption is always be higher than the income. So automatically consumer, you can say, buying more and more units, that means more and more consumption in respect of their income. So if you look up the consumption is 200, 350, 500, 650, and then 800. So automatically if your income is less than 800, so automatically in the table as well it is proof that the consumption is also increasing from 200 to 650 units, while if your income is less than 800 rupees. If your income is less than the 800 rupees, then automatically, if more than the 800 rupees, then automatically the consumption will slide lower than the income. So if you look up the main concept, that if your income is greater than the 800, so automatically consumption is also less than the income. That means the people, you can say, consume a slight less than the income. So if you look up, the slight changes 950 to 1100, 1100 to 1250, then 1250 to 1400. That means if your income is more than the 800 rupees, your consumption will become a slight lower than, as compared the income level which is less than the 800, or the consumption level which is less than the 800. So it's more than, it's getting more and more if the income is more than less than 800. If the income is more than 800, that means there is a slight consumption will become lower, will become low or become less. That means the people are actually buying less and less quantities in respect of their more income. So that is the theoretical framework. If the income is less than 800, consumption become more. Then the income is greater than, the consumption become less. Why it become less? Because when the income is more, the consumption will become, okay, there will be, the consumer will buy the quantities of goods, but in a very less quantities. So this is the conceptual framework according to their needs. So this is the graphical representation when where we talk about output and income. So the 45-degree angle line, that is the income line which stands Y, and C is a consumption spending line which is all shown in the red. So there is a point which already shown that your income and consumption is equal to 800. So it is also shown in the diagram as well, that that point, that when the income is equal to consumption and they intersect each other, the interaction point is actually called the equilibrium income level point, where which is equal to 800, you can see units, oblique rupees, that is 800 rupees, and ultimately the outcome is also in rupees. So your consumption spending, if 800 units, your income and output is also come up to the 800 rupees only. So this is called the consumption schedule. This is a graphical representation which is shown by the consumption schedule, which shows total consumption of all the, you can see, consumers of all the particular producer, that how much they consume in respect of their income. And when we show a graphical representation of a consumption schedule, you can, that's called the consumption curve or income curve. So this is a way that how you describe or how you draw these curves based on the consumption schedule. So when you look up this consumption and income, in other words, we can also say it is a consumption schedule where the income and consumption values has been given, and ultimately we need to calculate the MPC. And this is the consumption schedule which is shown a level of consumption spending and the output and income. So this is a way that how you draw the diagrams based on the tabular representation, or in other words, consumption schedule. Now we talk about the next concept, uh, with respect to the following schedule, consumption schedule. So when we talk about, there are two main concepts to be occur, that is autonomous consumption spending. So if you look up the autonomous consumption spending, your income, your autonomous income, that is 150, and your autonomous consumption is 200. So when we talk about at delta C, it's 200. So it's, in other words, we can say it is autonomous consumption spending. That means your consumption spending does not depends on your income. Whether your income increases, whether your consumption increases or decreases, it doesn't matter. Your delta C will remains the same in respective your income, your increase or decrease, increase in your income. So ultimately, if the consumption spending, your delta C will remains constant. So theoretically, we can, in other words, we can say it is an autonomous consumption spending, which in the example it's shown is equal to 200. That means when your income is increases, but your autonomous consumption spending, your delta C will also remain the same. That is 200 to 200 and so on. There is a next concept which you need to which have been calculated in the following, in the earlier table, which is called a consumption schedule, that is MPC, that is marginal propensity to consume. That means your consumption spending is totally depends upon your income. So if your income is increasing, then automatically your consumption spending is also increasing. So automatically, when they have a positive relationship between these two concepts, that is, you can say consumption spending and income, by an increase of 1 unit, or by an increase of 1 rupee or 5 rupees or 10 rupees, and ultimately your consumption is also getting increased. So that's called the marginal propensity to consume. That means if your income remains constant in the you can say addition, by adding up an additional units, and your change in consumption is also getting increased, then automatically when there is a change in both these terms, then automatically it refers to marginal propensity to consume. So if your income increases by additional 1 rupee, your consumption spending will also get increased by additional 1 unit, and that's called marginal propensity to consume. Now, when we talk about how to calculate the marginal propensity to consume, that is delta C by delta Y, that means C stands for consumption spending and Y stands for income. When we talk about the mathematical calculation, the value, if you look up the earlier table where the MPC has been estimated as 0.75, it's already written on the screen, yeah, on the PPT. That is the value of MPC is always been between 0 to 1. So if we talk about 0.25, it always come between 0 to 1, 0.11. So whatever the value comes, you get a value of MPC comes between between 0 and 1 only. So for example, if MPC 0.75, it means if there is an increase of 1 rupee in income, automatically it would be the 0.75 units would get units increase in consumption spending. So that means an additional 0.75 units will also, you can say, increase in consumption spending if there is an increase by 1 rupee in your income. So that's called marginal propensity to consume. So this is how the example shown that delta C is become 150 and delta Y is 200. So ultimately what would be the value? It's 0.75. So whatever the values has been taken from the you can say tabular representation or tabular in the earlier table of the consumption schedule. This is the equation of consumption function, that is the C. C stands for consumption function is equal to small c, that is consumption spending, plus MPC, that is the marginal propensity to consume, into Y. Y stands for income. So C is equal to 200 plus 0.75, which has been estimated MPC, and the consumption is 200. So if you look up the table, so that is shown MPC is 0.75. So MPC it's 0.75 income. So this and 200 is the consumption. If you look up the table, the first digit of the consumption is 200 and the income is 0. So if we talk about the first row of estimating the consumption function, so that is the 200 plus 0.75 y. That means C is equal, consumption function is equal to 200 plus 0.75 y. So if we talk about this is the consumption function of first row of the consumption schedule. If you can also calculate of the second row, calculate the consumption function of the second row, third row, and so on, relate to the consumption schedule. Now we talk about the savings and income. So automatically when we talk about savings and income, so automatically the income is always equal to consumption plus savings. So while substituting this equation, so we get the saving function, that means that is equal to y minus c, that means income minus consumptions. So whatever is your income, whatever your spending level, once you get a difference between these two particular concepts, you will get the value of savings. So what is the savings? Whatever the money that you save from your income and consumption, or by having or differences between the income and consumption, the amount that you get, it's actual savings. So the sum of consumption, spending, and saving must equal to income. And so while substituting on subtracting the C from both the sides, then ultimate the particular formula that comes, that is savings is equal to income minus consumption. So this is a relationship between the income and savings. So when as I told that when MPC is a major concept related to the consumption and income. So here when we talk about the income and savings, that MPS, that means marginal propensity to save. That means delta S, that means delta change in savings by change in income. So automatically your savings is totally depends on your income. So whatever you earn, it's your responsibility to save whatever amount could be after consuming the amount on goods and services from your income. So once you get a difference between these two, consumption and income, then automatically you will get, or your money would get saved, and that amount, which it's called savings. So how the table could represent your income and consumption is automatically given, and your savings, it's automatically you need to find out delta y, you need to find out delta c, it's automatically the same, delta s you need to calculate in the same way, and then ultimately you will calculate the mps. So let's begin the question. In the particular question, you need to, the income and consumption has been given to you, you need to calculate the mps. MPS stands for marginal propensity to save. So once you have income and consumptions, definitely you can easily calculate savings. How? What is the formula of saving? S is equal to Y minus C. Y stands for income and C stands for consumption spending. That is 0 minus 200, 200 minus 350 minus 150, 450 minus 500 minus 100, 600 minus 650 minus 50, 800 minus 800, 0, and so on. So if you look up, if any it's less than 0, it becomes, all the values becomes negative, and more than 0, all the values become positive. So when we calculate the change in income will remains the same 200, that means, which is the earlier part of this you can say question. Delta C is also remains the same, that is 150. Now we need to calculate a new concept over here, that is delta S. So when we talk about delta S, it's minus 200, automatically will get no result on no particular value, it remains blank. That is not applicable, as minus 200 there's no upper value where the minus 200 can be deducted. So ultimately it's not applicable, or you can put dash. So when we talk about the second, that is minus 150 minus 200, then automatically you will get 50. Then minus 200 minus 100 you can say minus 100 plus 150, you will get 50. Minus 50 plus 100, you will get 50. 0 plus 50, you will get 50. But why the positive values will come? Because we are subtracting and the value is already in negative. So that if we talk about minus 150 minus bracket means minus 200, it becomes positive. That means minus 150 plus 200, that means 50. So the every value and the savings would remains the same, 50. So automatically we have calculated the marginal propensity to save, that is delta S by delta Y. So delta S is 50 and delta Y is 200. So the ultimate value that we estimated is 0.25. So once we calculate one by one the same delta S by delta Y, you will get 0.25 in all the, you can see in the whole column, right? So this is called MPS, and this is a way that how you calculate step by step the MPS. And with this, in using the same table, you can also calculate MPC, that is delta C by delta Y. That means 0.75, or in all the values in column, in the next column if you calculate NPC. So it's very easy to estimate, and if you have the income and consumption values in the question. So this is the next same concepts which has been described. So this is the marginal propensity to save. It means if there is any increase in income, so automatically there should be an increase in saving for a 1 rupee or for a 2 rupees or a 5 rupees. So if there is a change in income by 1 rupee, so automatically there should be an increase in savings for 1 rupee, and that's called marginal propensity to save. So if we look up the example above, so delta S is equal to 50 and delta Y is equal to 200. So automatically the value would comes of MPS is 0.25. So your MPS is 0.25. So in the follow-up, in the earlier table also, you have the MPS is 0.25 of all the income level. So the saving function, which has always been equal, that is MPC plus MPS is equal to 1. So this is the equation where the both marginal propensity to consume and save will always be equal. So when we talk about this saving schedule, so it shows all the values of savings at all or each level of income. So if you look up the relationship between the income and saving, in other words, it is also called the savings schedule, where all the values of savings has been shown, has been estimated at each levels of income. So when we talk about the saving function is equal to C plus MPSY. Why? It's minus 200. So if you see the earlier table, S is equal to minus 200. So what is the saving function equation? That is S is equal to S my plus, you can see MPS Y. So this is an equation which has been shown over here, that is S is equal to S plus MPS Y. So here in the earlier schedule, the saving schedule, that is the minus 200. Why it's minus 200? Because in the saving column, first digit is minus 200. That means how to estimate this and how to formulate the saving function equation, that is S is equal to S plus, that is MPS Y. So S is equal to S is minus 200, MPS is 0.25 and Y. So this is a way that how the MPS is 2.25, so automatically the equation would be saving function equation would be, that is S is equal to minus 200.25 Y. And you can easily calculate the saving function equation at all the levels of income, at each level of income in the same way. The formula stands of saving function is S is equal to S plus MPS Y, and the same procedure has been followed up here. Relationship between MPC and MPS. So as the equation, the relationship equation is Y is equal equal to C plus S. So automatically, when there is a changes in all these three concepts that will follow up, that is delta Y is equal to delta C plus delta S. So once we divide all these terms by delta Y, then you will get a relationship between of these two concepts, that is MPC plus MPS. That means the ultimate outcome of the relationship between these two concepts is 1 plus MPC plus MPS. So ultimately, how this relationship shown, we need to calculate. See, it's written note MPC plus NPS is equal to 1. We need to estimate the same result using the concepts of savings and consumption and income, and that is the ultimate relationship between MPC and MPS. So the how it will be generated, the equation, the main relationship of MPC and MPS, that is 1 is equal to MPC plus MPS. How this result would come out? Because of follow up the concept of Y is equal to C plus S. So once there is a change in income, automatically there is a change in consumption and savings. So ultimately, in a mathematically, we can put delta Y is equal to delta C plus delta S. So once we divide by delta Y all these three concepts, you will get 1 is equal to MPC plus MPS. So it's very simple how to show the relationship between the MPC and MPS. So this is a diagrammatic presentation here, propensity to save. If you look up the savings, your savings equation always begins from negative to positive. So your negative begins from minus 200, then minus 50, then again positive 800, and so on. It increases. So when we talk about propensity to save, the curve will always begins from negative to positive with a you can say a straight line. We talk about the positive side, it is a positive 40-degree line, but when negative, it always begins from the negative, and positive, it begins from the 40, that is saving function line. Your income is already given, so automatically has been using the concept of the saving schedule, which has been shown in the form of relationship between the savings and income. So it's very easy. Once you draw the diagram, whatever the values has been shown in the saving schedule, draw it and value it accordingly. So just put in the values in the particular graph and just draw the line accordingly, and that ultimately called the saving function line, and in the words propensity to save. So the determination of equilibrium income in a two-sector economy. So when we talk about two-sector economy, we always talk about the circular flow of income, where the household and firms will always the two main consequence in this particular model, that is the households and firms. So when we talk about how this equilibrium income level point to be obtained, that is aggregate expenditure is equal to consumption plus income. That means a combination of income and you can say investment. So when we talk about I stands for autonomous. So autonomous means if their investment is 100, so I is also become 100 at each level of income. So aggregate expenditure is equal to consumption plus investment. So automatically, if aggregate expenditure are always equal to income, so if there is 1200 is aggregate expenditure, your income would be also the 1200. So this is called the two-sector economy, where the consumption and investment is equal to aggregate expenditure, and aggregate expenditure is equal to income. So I is autonomous investment, which equals to, we assumed it's based on assumption that is equals to 100. So this is a basic points where you can key points, I could say, where you can understand and elaborate these points in your presentation. So this is a way that how we use the schedule relate to the consumption, investment, and equilibrium income. So when we talk about how in this particular schedule we have to show that aggregate expenditure is equal to income, right? And the C plus I, it's also become equal to AE. So how it will be show up over here? So let's begin. Your income and consumption is always being given. Savings, you need to calculate this. What is the formula of saving? Y minus C. Just put the formula into the values. You will get the saving value, saving values in the saving column, that is minus 100, minus 50, 0, 15, 100, and 150. When we talk about the investment, as we assume there is a 100 in the particular conceptual, we assume that autonomous investment will become 100. So aggregate expenditure, how to calculate when we add C plus I. So once we add C plus I, you will get the aggregate expenditure. So it means what is the equilibrium level, that is your aggregate expenditure is equal to C plus I, and which is equal in the following table, and aggregate expenditure is also equal to income, that is 1200 to 1200. So that means the equilibrium point has been achieved using this tabular representation or consumption and investment and equilibrium level. So that's it for that's it for today. We'll come up a new more and more important topics.